Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the joint meeting for the Rules and Open Government Committee and Committee of the Whole. Looks like we have a quorum, so Tony, can you call roll?
Arenas?
Here.
Cohen?
Here.
Davis?
Here.
Morales? Jones?
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to start out with the first agenda, which is the agenda for Tuesday, September 20th. And we're going to start out on pages 4 and 5. Six and 7. 8 and 9. 10 and 11. 12 and 13. And 14. So we will go to public comments.
Blair Beekman?
Hi, Blair Beekman here. You've moved digital privacy issues with camera use back to the 20th. That will be along with the Monterey Corridor Transit Report. That's kind of smart to do. It works better in tandem, I think, for on this day. Just an overall reminder that in the importance of how much we want community safety with more and more surveillance cameras and ALPR use and the stoplight cameras and the like. That's a pretty important ask of a pretty large segment of our community at this time. Please keep in mind that all of that technology you're asking for is just offering a ton of data. And that data is going to places I don't think you guys will want and not very comfortable with. We're really developing a new wave of practices that can address what are the open public policies and what are the civil rights and civil protections you have as an everyday person to that data that's going all over the country. I mean, they're taking that law enforcement data and bundling it in packages for commercial use and to sell commercially and to be used for, purposes of ICE. So we have to be very, very cautious about what exactly we're doing with the future of our surveillance and data collection. And it's open public policy practices and it's accountability that has to really be a part of all this technology that's wanted for the future of community safety. Important reminder that, and I hope we can be having these open conversations this fall as we have a chance to really address these sort of issues. Thank you.
Back to the committee.
Thank you. And before we entertain a motion, I want to ask Lee, has this agenda been properly load balanced?
Yes, it has, Vice Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Move approval.
Can I get a second, please?
Second.
I do have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Just a question, Lee. On the Horizon report, there was an item on electrification that was supposed to be a contract for the electrification. Is that being delayed to a future meeting beyond this 27th? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm asking about the wrong meeting. I'm waiting. I'll ask this question for the 27th.
All right. I'll keep you on the board. How's that? All right. So we have a motion and a second. Agenda's been properly load balanced. Let's get a roll call.
Arenas?
Yes.
Cohen?
Aye.
Davis?
Yes.
Morales?
Yes.
Jones?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, on to the agenda for Tuesday, September 27th. And we're going to start out with the usual pages 4 and 5. 6 and 7. 8 and 9. 10 and 11. 12 and 13. All right, let's go to public comments.
Blair Beekman.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. Sorry, my voice was a bit strong and whiny on the previous item. I'll try not to be so strong. For this, for 2.7 is the continuation of teleconferencing and during a state of emergency. And, you know, the way this teleconferencing has arrived has not been very good, very cool, but it is actually, it has been a pretty interesting tool that I think makes accessibility for the public meeting process a lot easier. And so it's been of a lot of help in that way. And at this time, I just wanted to remind the importance that for people to want to feel safe and comfortable, to want to speak at this time, perhaps either in person or at the public meeting process on Zoom, you know, to make that process safe for them, safe as it can be. Good luck how to do that. If people have questions about the technology of the Zoom and the data collection, where it will be going, what exactly, how exactly is the technology used, good luck on how to be open and honest in answering those questions. To again note that with the abortion issues of this past summer, we're really questioning the concepts of data collection again, and the commercial use of data and law enforcement data. We're at that time to have those open conversations again. Good luck how we work in San Jose at this time to make it open conversations. San Jose is doing some interesting work with community and data collection at this time. Thank you, incredibly. Good luck. I think I'm offering pieces of what you need to be working on. Good luck on the openness of this sort of dialogue. Thank you.
Caller 4963, please press *6 to unmute.
Yes, hi, Martha O'Connell, GSMOL, following on with Blair's comments. The Zoom meetings are great. They accommodate the disabled, the night blind who cannot drive at night, and the otherwise disabled. I've also heard people say that they're at work at night and they set aside 15 or 20 minutes to call in on a specific item so that they can participate. So I urge you to continue the hybrid meetings. Thank you.
Back to the committee.
Thank you. Now, Councilmember Cohen.
I think you know a question I'm going to ask. So there was supposed to be on the 27th electrification contract. Is that being postponed? There is an item on consent, but I don't think that's the same one.
Yeah, there is a 2.10, a authorization for the city manager to negotiate and execute energy agreements. If it was on the Horizon report around building electrification, there was a deferral to the first or the second meeting of October, so it could have been that item.
Okay, I think that's what it was then. Thank you. So I'll move approval of the agenda.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Lee, I'm not going to ask you a load balancing question on this specific agenda, but just in general. You know, we're in September. We're going to be in October before you know it, and I just want to make sure that we have a balanced schedule for the end of the year, because I don't know if Raul and I can put up with a midnight meeting in December.
Well,
I'll speak for myself.
From the administration's perspective, we're very much looking for the opportunity to work with you and Raul much longer into the nights, but we do understand and are trying to balance from now until the end of the year. Yes, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
I think we also need to cancel the 6 p.m. meeting on the 27th because it's listed as a 6 p.m. meeting, but there's no evening items. So the maker of the motion just officially cancel the 6 p.m.
Okay, there's no items on land use,
No.
right? So there's no, okay, so I'll
I think
include that in the
there
motion.
is, but it's noticed for the afternoon or something, but there's no evening items.
Right, it was,
There's
I think they were
6
noticed to happen immediately following closed
consent, yeah, but
consent.
6 p.m. is still listed
Okay.
on the agenda.
Oh, okay, so I'll add to the motion the removal of the 6 p.m. meeting.
Please, thank you. And that's all right with the seconder?
Yes.
Tony?
Arenas,
Yes.
Cohen,
Aye.
Davis,
Yes.
Peralez,
Yes.
Jones.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are on to the consent calendar, and we're going to go to public comments.
Blair,
Hi, Blair Beekman here. Councilperson Jimenez travels to, he has 3 travel requests that I just wanted to comment on one of them. He's going to a Sister Cities International U.S.-Mexico Mayors Community Summit in San Diego and Tijuana on October 11th and 12th, or 11th through the 13th, sorry. And I just find that amazingly interesting. Good luck in what he can discover on such a trip. There is some really harsh drug gang issues going on in Tijuana at this time, and for some sort of report back and understanding from the council person can be of much help that I think we can address and really ask people in that area to question what their actions are about and limit their actions that are just harassing the rest of us. They've been attacking journalists on top of everything else, and it's just made clear to me the importance of the journalist profession and how we need to respect that, what sort of job a journalist can play, and that should be respected instead of annihilated. So good luck to Sergio Menez's work in this area, and it'll be nice to hear what he has to say on his trip to Tijuana at that time. Thank you.
back to the committee.
Thank you. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
I'll move approval.
Motion to approve.
Look, okay, that works. Tony?
Arenas,
Yes.
Cohen,
Aye.
Davis,
Yes.
Peralez,
Yes.
Jones.
Aye.
Thank you.
Next item is PG&E power outages and infrastructure repair and resilience. And I will kick this over to Lee to speak to this item.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. The administration does have an early consideration form out on this item. The items are greenlit, and Deputy City Manager Kip Harkness is here to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you. I will now go to the public for public comments.
Blair Beekman,
Hi, just a quick reminder in all this important work you are doing for this item, the importance of a future of community energy that I hope can better address these sort of questions that you're currently going through with PG&E at this time. Good luck in that transition that I hope we all want to make towards community energy in our future, and that it can be a full community effort and not just for a select elite few. Thank you.
back to the committee.
Thank you. I see Mayor Liccardo is in attendance. Mayor, this item has been greenlit, so I don't know if you want to speak to it or not. And
Well, Vice Mayor, if you're suggesting I shouldn't steal defeat from the jaws of victory, I'm happy to keep my mouth shut. But
that
if
is
anyone has any
exactly
questions-
what I was suggesting.
All right, then I'll keep my mouth shut, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, fantastic. So I'm going to go to the committee and Councilmember Peralez.
Thank you. See if I can get the mayor to talk. So I'm just curious on the yellow lit portion of this, reading in the staff early consideration form. It looks like it's just recommendation 1 that has a sort of summary conclusion of being yellow lit. So if maybe staff can just describe sort of what, the way I was initially reading it was look like this is kind of green lit overall. So maybe you can just describe the variation there.
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Kip Harkness, Deputy City Manager. What we were trying to indicate in that was that we believe we can handle a kind of light touch review with PG&E, and if they get that plan together, we can do an initial review of that, and if they are in charge of implementing it, coordinate with them on that. If it goes to a deeper level of analysis where we really need to dig into that report or we need to project manage it, we don't have the capacity on staff as is structured right now to do that. So green lit it with the light touch cooperative version, yellow lit if we have to come back and do a little more heavy project management or analysis.
Okay, so I will kick it over to the mayor just to kind of see it, if that is acceptable for what you were looking for, Mayor.
Thanks. Maybe what I should do is, I know that we had been passing, drafts back and forth, but I'm not sure we've really had a chance to talk about it in depth. And so let me just say what I know from what Patricia Poppy, the CEO of PG&E, offered to us was that, we would meet right away to get some immediate feedback, and then they would take based on that, a second meeting where they could offer a draft of their plan for capital placement repair here in San Jose to our team. And that might be something that might require a bit more scrutiny, obviously more detail. And I guess the question I would just ask through the chair is whether staff believes, we can either get a consultant on board to help, or we have the staff ability to be able to look at their preliminary plan and say, okay, this is something we think will do the job or it won't.
Go ahead, Kip.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee, I believe that we have the capability either in-house or that we can tap into existing contracts to do that initial assessment. It's if it requires kind of ongoing further deeper work is where we lack the resources. So I think we have what we need to comply with that direction and that intent.
Great.
Okay, that's all with my questions.
Councilmember Cohen?
Yeah, just one question on this. Just in terms of the scope, I mean, I agree with that analysis of the infrastructure and infrastructure needs. Would that include, or could we include in that making sure we have information about what PG&E's plans are for the undergrounding of lines in the city that are not yet undergrounded, and make sure we have an understanding of what their thoughts are about timelines for that throughout the city?
Kip Harkness again. There's a couple of different undergrounding pieces that are going on. There are the undergrounding of the transmission lines that they're working on, which is largely rural and largely outside of our area. And then their ongoing undergrounding, which had been funded by a couple of different sources of funding, which is essentially dried up within the city. I certainly can report back on where they are or they aren't in terms of funding undergrounding, but it's a little bit to the side of this work, but we do have a sense of where they are and they aren't on undergrounding, and could report back with that as well.
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking that as part of this infrastructure inventory, that knowing what still remains in our internal to the city that's not undergrounded is critical in this because a lot of that's older equipment that is more likely to fail, that causes more fire danger, et cetera. And maybe this isn't a question of when you're going to do it, but what's still there? What areas still need to be undergrounded or haven't been undergrounded? And can we just sort of see that as part of this analysis of the infrastructure?
Yeah, we can certainly bring that up with PG&E. We and they should be very aware of where that is. And again, it would be to them to assess what the sort of level of safety issues that above ground utilities cause in the urban environment. But we can add that question into them as we bring the planning forward and see what they're able to bring back.
Yeah,
So
that would be my request to sort of add that. So I'll make a motion to accept the memo with that addition.
Second.
Thank you. I don't see any hands raised or any more names on the board, so you have a motion and a second. Tony?
Arenas? Cohen?
Aye.
Davis?
Yes.
Peralez?
Yes.
Jones?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is accelerating Sjpd staffing levels. And this item is yellow lit, and I'm gonna let Lee speak to this item?
Actually, Chair, I was going to say the same, that this is recommended by the administration as a yellow light, but our budget director, Jim Shannon, and Assistant Chief of Police, Paul Joseph, are here for any questions that the committee has.
Thank you, Lee. We're going to go to public comments first.
Blair Beekman?
Hi, Blair Beekman here. Thank you very much, Vice Mayor Jones, that you asked for city staff report first and then public comment. Thank you. For myself, you know, we've just made a big important to-do that we have to have more and more police in our presence, and that can address overtime issues and perhaps even help with the recidivism issues at the county jail level. So, you know, things are dreamy for what you guys have really been wanting. But I really question, you know, its use. And when you start asking these sort of questions, I hope that you can do it with a sense that it's question asking, and that we are really focused towards a future of just not more and more police to solve all our issues. I mean, we have issues of how we can invite, you know, SEIU union persons and everyday community to take on more administrative roles within the police department. That is not being talked about here at all. Why not? I mean, why aren't we talking about the ideas of reimagine now? This is a perfect time to do that. And these sort of questions have to be framed around those sort of things. I'm really kind of upset, like with the IPA report yesterday, that obviously has been proving we are completely no-toeing to the police at this time, and the concepts that we have to worry about crime. That still means that we can't ask the larger questions of our long-term future. Let's learn how to do that and balance it and work it all together. It's not just one of everything and then all the way over to the other side of everything. Please learn to balance our conversations. Thank you.
Back to the committee.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Davis.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. So my colleagues and I brought this forward, and I understand that it is mostly yellow lit, but we were very concerned when the mandatory overtime notice came out, and knowing that, as I know you know, Deputy Chief or Assistant Chief, that we are already quite understaffed, especially in the traffic enforcement unit, and as well as many other units. We were very concerned, and so what we're really wanting to do is to say, I would disagree with the assessment that this is not time critical or an emergency. I know that we have items in the budget such as lateral incentive, hiring incentives, and some other items for increasing over time. But I also understand that we have very small classes currently for the academy. So that's kind of knowing how critical our needs are for staffing, and the fact that our incoming classes are very small. I think the one that's graduating this Friday is going to graduate with how many? Is it 20? 19. And that's much less than half. It's maybe 40% of what the classes have prior to the pandemic were regularly churning out. What's the next incoming class? I think they're starting in October, is that right? Right, and the classes used to be in the 60s.
They've been as high as the high 50s, I believe, in recent years.
Right. So, and we know that we've been having people dropping out of academies or not passing through. I think this current class that's graduating 19 started with how many?
It started with, I believe, 32.
Yeah. So that's the reason for this memo. And again, I I respectfully disagree with the fact that this has been given by administration a not time critical. And I would very much like to know what we can do this year to ensure that we are it sounds to me like we're not even going to be replacing all of the retirements with the academies this year.
I can't say for certain, but I do know this. We're
not on track to do that.
Yeah, as you've pointed out, council member, we're experiencing smaller than usual academy classes. We're also experiencing higher than usual retirement rates and other separations from service. And I believe that the police department gave a more full presentation on this recently. But you're right, we are experiencing a personnel issue at this time.
Right. I'll let my colleague, Councilmember Cohen, speak to this a little bit more. I'm very concerned, and I would like to submit to the Rules Committee that this is actually a much more time critical issue than our administration has put in their early consideration response form.
Okay. Councilmember Cohen?
Yeah, I'm going to just sort of summarize why the memo was written the way it was and what the overall objectives were a little bit. I think it was a year ago, or more than a year ago probably, that we had the audit from the city auditor about the police budget and overtime, and it had a lot in there. But I asked the question at that time why we have such a high overtime spend in our budget, and I understand the reason for it. I mean, when we have a certain level of staffing that we think is a minimal need, we're not even really asking in this memo about ideally how many police officers would we have, because that's a whole different question. But there is a minimum staffing need that the city needs, and the city is saying that even at our current staffed level, we are unable to fully staff all of the patrols we need. We don't have enough patrol ready. We also have people who always are going to be out for various reasons, either on sick leave or vacation or other needs. And the result is that we use overtime to keep us staffed where we need to be. And so the question I asked then was, what is the ideal level of staffing that would prevent us from having to have this high level of overtime spend, not going to zero in overtime, because we know there's some significant amount that would need to be used for people who are held over because they're on a call or they need to finish paperwork, or emergency drops in staffing. But if we're relying on the fact that we regularly have to have pay cards and other types of methods where people either voluntarily or asked to do mandatory overtime, that's not necessarily the best way to staff. There's reason, and the results of that are that we end up with officers who burn out, who are tired, who aren't necessarily at top of their game. And we also have an issue in our city with not meeting our response times. So this is sort of the primary first question in this memo is, let's just figure out where that balance should be. Not necessarily yet say how we get there, because that's a whole nother question in terms of budgeting and hiring. I fully appreciate that increasing recruitment numbers is not necessarily in our control all the time. I mean, there's been a reduction, I think, nationally in people who are applying for these kinds of jobs, so it's not just a San Jose problem. And I'm glad that we have high standards so that when people are in our program, we don't necessarily just graduate them through just because they're there and we need the numbers. We actually, the fact that we're down to only 19 out of 35 making it through should be seen as a good thing, because it means we have high standards and not everybody's qualified. But that leads to the issues that we're seeing with staffing. So my primary objective here first is to find out what are the numbers we need so that we don't have to necessarily rely on overtime as heavily. For example, we can do an analysis of what is the typical number of people who are out at any given time that need to be backfilled for. We should be staffing at the level that takes into account that kind of people being that level of people being out, so that we don't have to rely on overtime for that, because at any given time there's going to be some number who are out. So I think it would be doing that analysis and understanding that is sort of the first step. The second step is, coming up with a plan for how we get from where we are today to that point, what kinds of changes we can make in our recruitment, in our lateral hire procedures and bonuses, what kind of incentives we need for people to come join this police department, so that we, and what kind of changes can we make in our academy so we can maybe have a higher capacity if that's an issue as well, so that we can get to that point. And that's kind of the second step of this analysis. And I agree with Councilmember Davis, we don't necessarily have the time to wait for the analysis. That doesn't necessarily mean that in 6 months we're going to have a whole bunch more staff in our police department, but I think it's important to have that in front of us as a roadmap for where we need to go. So that's the, I think, the gist of what's in the memo. And I'm hoping that we can approve that and then have staff begin to do that analysis for us. I don't know if you have any, if you want to give any feedback or.
If I could, yeah, thank you, committee member. This is Jim Shannon, budget director. Yeah, I think one of the things that staff was reacting to in the recommendation language, which talks about the addition of staffing in 22-23, and we kind of just wanted to clarify that the high levels of overtime that we're spending, which totally agree those are not sustainable over the longer term. We're doing those sort of to be able to spend that high level of overtime above what's officially in our budget, because we're using the vacancy savings elsewhere in the department to be able to accommodate that. So we're not in a position yet where we can sort of trade in overtime costs and buy full-time positions yet. I think we want to get there. And that's what I know we had an MBA a couple years back to sort of to talk about that once we got closer to getting full up, as we get the recruit academies higher and additional lateral transfers. So that was one of the key reasons here. Just kind of wanted to clarify, there's not really a mechanism to add sworn staff in 22-23 by trading in the overtime, but that longer term analysis is something that, certainly has to be sort of part of the police department's future.
Okay, and I appreciate that. I mean, I think we need to just see that sort of part of the analysis, and I think that putting in the idea that 22-23 is a goal is just something that's, because it's on top of our mind and because we do have this issue right now with burnout, with high overtime, with relying so much on some of these either mandatory or voluntary shifts. We would hope that there's a mechanism to, whether it's slowly or quickly, make some changes. But that'll be part of this analysis. What can be done this year, next year, the year after that? I think that's kind of the only question that I'd be asking. I know maybe Councilmember Davis will have a little bit different perspective on that, but that's kind of what I want to see. It's interesting, we are what we consider to be low vacancy right now, and I think that that's because we have a budgeted number and we're doing well at hitting that budgeted number. My question is whether the budgeted number is right, not whether we're actually have low vacancy. Because if you have low vacancy and you still are spending a lot on overtime, it means that we're aiming for a vacancy number based on the wrong denominator. And I guess that's kind of what I'm looking for. So I'll just go ahead and move the memo and see if others have questions about it.
All right, it's been moved and seconded.
Could I ask a clarifying question? So, so for the, because I think that, again, I think that analysis certainly is important. I just wanted to clarify the expectation of the recommendation is to try to add sworn staffing bodies in 22-23, or maybe the feasibility of how that works as part of this analysis.
And if trying to word all this is not always the easiest in these memos, but if you notice, it says, for staffing additions that can be made starting in fiscal year 22-23. So the goal is, you have to start somewhere. We just want that analysis to include starting right away, but it could be, say, only one can be added this year, but 10, whatever it is. That's kind of like.
So if I can jump in, I think in the previous part of your comments and consistent with, I think, what Councilmember Davis was mentioning, what can be done in this year, and that analysis around overtime and, what is an appropriate floor, minimal staffing. I think that's definitely a good exercise for us to do within the budget office, city manager's office, and PD, and possibly come, even if it's a high level analysis, back to the Public Safety, Finance and Strategic Support Committee before the end of the year with an outline about that. I do want to say, I do think the larger conversation about what the ceiling is it's a longer term conversation. It's a good conversation to have. I would say with adding ongoing resources in 22, 23 though, that puts Jim in a position where he's going to be coming back to you recommending cuts in the organization outside of the budget process. And so that is, it's not just what we think we would add, but it's recommending cuts elsewhere in the organization. And that's a difficult conversation outside of the budget process. So I want to make clear that under the current direction, that is the direction we would be receiving.
Okay, I'll just make one comment on that. I understand. So if that is the recommendation that comes out due to this study, then we would probably say, well, let's not do that, right? But I think it's important for us to really look at that because, and I know the issue here is you don't just, as in other departments where you hire somebody and they immediately start ready to do their job. If we're bringing people in who need to go through the academy, they're not street ready, and therefore it doesn't cut the overtime immediately. But I just want to see that analysis. At what point during a hiring process does the overtime then reduce, and therefore we're not necessarily spending more and making cuts elsewhere? How long does it take to get to that point at which we're not doing that? And there's also as has been raised, I think Councilmember Davis mentioned it, lateral hires. There's other ways of bringing people on board.
I'll let the assistant chief speak, but I'd like
that.
to mention something on the laterals.
Yeah, so Paul Joseph, Assistant Chief of Police. So first of all, can I just say thank you? I mean, thank you for telling us that you agree we need some more officers, because I mean, we certainly agree with you there. And you're right. I mean, the average police officer per citizen ratio in this country is 2.4 per thousand, and we're at 1 per thousand. So when you talk about what's the number we need, I mean, the Chief Mata put out a manager's budget addendum in May of this year, which laid out, kind of a roadmap to get us back to the staffing level that we had prior to the change, the loss of personnel we suffered during Measure B. And that was to get us in the area of 1,353. And that's, that's a goal we would like to attain, and we thought was a reasonable goal based on, obviously there are other competing city priorities. We're not the only department in the city. And our capacity to recruit, train, hire people, really that's probably the max that we could expect would be an additional 40 positions a year over the next 5 years. That being said, there are some factors that are obviously beyond our control here. The desirability of police work as a profession across this country has certainly changed, and we're far from the only police department that's dealing with this kind of an issue. We have issues that are unique to this police department in terms of just right now having some small classes and a lot of retirements. But I will say this, just in the short term, the pay cards that we put out to cover some vacancies in patrol were fairly modest, and they were a result of dipping below what our current authorized strength is. In other words, we're about 50, I think, below what our authorized strength is, which is 1158, and we're at 1108. Those are the numbers that I have as recently as a week ago. And so before that, we were not fielding any regularly scheduled patrol pay cards. So, I mean, to get rid of those, overtime costs isn't that much of a struggle for us, but the larger picture is, why do we spend so much overtime as a department at all? And I think that is what you're all getting at in terms of the chronic level of staffing that could stand a bolster if it's possible.
Yeah, and I think I'm looking at two steps here too. There's the chronic that we need to look at, and by the way, I want to make sure it's clear. I'm not saying that let's look at what the staffing levels are at every police department around the country and try to strive for that, because we know that's not necessarily realistic for our department. But you and the police department know how many street-ready officers you need on the street at any given time to meet the metric that you're trying to meet. And we should at least have that in front of us as well. What is that number? And I know you're saying we're 50 below that. What is the number that will make us feel comfortable that we can be at that number? And that's the shorter term or interim analysis as well that I'd like to see beyond the reaching for 1,350 total officers.
All right, thank you. Before we go to Councilmember Morales, Lee, can you summarize your understanding of what the motion is and what staff is supposed to do?
As of right now, my understanding is the motion on the floor is the memorandum from Councilmember Davis, Jimenez, and Cohen.
Right, which their expectation is that you're going to do or undertake an analysis, and I know that the early consideration was for was yellow. So I'm just trying to understand: is staff going to undertake any work now, or is this going to go to the prioritization process?
Well, you know, the Rules Committee has the authority to not listen to staff's recommendation that it's a yellow light and prioritize. So right now, no, it would not go to prioritization if the motion on the floor were to prevail. We would have to start working on it. And I do think because this reopens the 22-23 budget process, that ultimately council would probably need to make a decision on whether we would do this work. Because I do think adding positions, which I can get back to in a second, you know, that wouldn't be street ready, we still have to budget for those, unfortunately. And so that would cause a bit of an issue.
So this would have to continue on to council for council to make the
Yeah, I
decision.
mean, I certainly think you know, after the motion was made, I think where Councilmember Cohen is going, asking for, you know, what that number is and, you know, where we're tracking with overtime. I definitely think that is work that could be done, and we can shoot to do that before the end of the year. I would say there's, I think, two important factors for us as we do that work is what the costing is. And we're currently in negotiations with the Police Officers Association, and those are pretty important numbers to come up with a way of costing. And also, you know, just to both of your points, you've mentioned it several times, like what can be done in this year. And I do think you guys have made several important decisions as part of the budget process, adding the 15 officers, which is great. And obviously the academies aren't going to help us fill those as fast as we would like. But you also authorized funding for possible incentive pay for laterals. And so we are in negotiations. That is, you know, part of that process with the Police Officers Association we need to see through, because those officers don't need to go through an academy. They can get to the street much quicker. And so those are two things that are important for us to really understand and how they're working as we do that analysis for you.
Thank you.
Is there a way we can amend the motion to take out sort of an implication of short-term hiring so that it doesn't become we're not asking to reopen the budget for this year, but we're asking for the rest of the analysis that can guide us in future conversation? I mean, whether it's removing that phrase that can be made starting for fiscal year 22-23, or changing it to say, you know, bring back costs in case we decided we wanted to reopen budget or something like that.
I think that was your intent.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's your motion. So
okay, I'm asking you whether that would satisfy you as
Yeah,
far as not having to come back to council for that lot bigger conversation and just allowing the analysis to be done.
Yes, that would make it easier for us.
So then I'll make that change to the motion, amendment to the motion.
All right with the second?
Yes.
All right, I'm glad we worked that out. Before we go to my colleague, Councilmember Perales, Chief, I want to ask you a question, and I'm going to put you on the spot, so I didn't talk to you about this beforehand, so I know you can handle it. You know, we talk about our budget positions and what we're trying to get to, but based on other comparable cities, based on other ratios, in just the back of an envelope guess or estimate, where should we be as a city in terms of staffing? And sorry for putting you on the spot. And I won't hold you to the number because I know it's, you know, back of an envelope, but I think it's good to get those kind of numbers out there to the public.
Sure. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Well, what I'll do is I'll refer back to the budget addendum from May, and I'll say that our request, the chief's vision for the next 5 years, was to grow by 200 authorized positions to 1,353. That would put us in a position where we had been historically, where we were when I was hired in 1994, when our population was 250,000 fewer. The national average, as I mentioned, is about 2.4 officers per thousand. We're at 1 per thousand. So even 1,353 we would still, we would still say that there's going to be some limitations, but that would be an enormous boost to the ability for this department to provide public safety services to get to 1353.
But really, shouldn't we be talking about, again, this is just, in the perfect world, shouldn't we be talking about 2,000, 2,400? Are those kind of numbers that we...
I like your thinking. But I mean, again, we have to be realistic in the sense that, again, I obviously I value what the police department does for this community, and I realize how important it is, but I also understand that we're not the only, we're not the only department, and we're not the only service provider in the city. Again, we have a limitation. Even if we had a line of recruits out the door, people that couldn't wait to be San Jose police officers, we can only recruit, hire, train, and deploy so many, which is why we came up with a number that we thought was something we could realistically tell you we could do, which was an additional 40 a year. So, I mean, I wouldn't be here to see 2,000 even if you said today, hey, it's going to happen. But sure, at some point, you either have to have more police officers or provide less services or pay more overtime. I mean, those are the only three options there really are.
Right, and again, not to belabor the point, I understand in the perfect world and in reality, it is what it is, and we only have so much capacity and so much budget. But again, setting the expectations for our residents, knowing that we have, the most efficient police department in the country, and, hardworking and, go above and beyond. There's the reality that, whether we hit, 1,355 or, 1,058 or whatever that number is, that's still not going to be enough to provide the level of service that you expect from your department and what our residents expect.
Well,
I just wanted to just get that out there.
Thank you for those kind words and observations.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Perales.
Thanks, Assistant Chief. I got a couple questions as well. First off, I was just curious, what MBA number were you referring to?
The copy I have doesn't have a number on it. I apologize, but it's dated May 27th. Jim, do you have the number?
That MBA, no, but I will get it shortly. I want to say 41, but let me
It is 41.
just check. There we go.
It's NBA 41.
Okay, that's what I thought it was. I'm reading 41. I don't see those numbers in there, Assistant Chief. So I was just kind of curious. I don't know if there's something that has changed from the draft that you're holding on to versus.
It could have been NBA 28 that has those numbers in it as well. I believe both.
Well, go ahead, Chief.
Nonetheless,
Councilmember, what I'm looking at is page 2. There's a graph at the bottom, the Rebuilding SJPD Roadmap. It's sort of a serpentine-looking graph.
Yep.
And if you look at the on the far right, there's a sworn staffing level for 2026-2027 fiscal year of 1,353. If that's not on your copy, that's what I'm looking at, and I know that we
got it. It's not on this copy.
Okay.
So
And just in fairness, I think that MBA was to get authorization to add 15 ongoing sort of positions per year and describe the methodology by which we would do it. I think it's a number in a little graphic there. That's not, but that wasn't the intent actually of the MBA, which is why it's not in bright shining letters.
yeah, no, I recognize that. I thought it might have been this particular MBA, obviously titled "Rebuilding the San Jose Police Department." But I actually was very interested in what the Assistant Chief was saying, because this is something, and as our Vice Mayor knows, he and I, with both our police department and our fire department over the years through the Public Safety Committee, have had these ongoing conversations talking about and recognizing the challenges. Thank you, Chief, for just pointing out that even if we got to a number like 2,000, it would be hypothetical for a decade or more, right? Because the reality is that we can't build that quickly, right? It's going to take us time, and so we have been more realistic in our approach of how quickly can we grow, and what does that look like? And I know I've been advocating for that, but that number that you pointed out, I didn't recall hearing it before, and then looking in the MBA here, I didn't see it, but I actually appreciate that, where maybe the Chief called out that, hey, we'd like to get back up to close to the 1,400 that we had, and here's what that looks like. So I don't know if maybe that was a draft that the Chief had, but I'd like to maybe see a copy of that, and if we chat about that if this does come back to the Public Safety Committee before the end of the year. I would like to dive in a little bit about that. It looks like that'll happen anyways, based on the motion here, right? Likely that figure will present itself, but I hadn't seen it before. I hadn't seen an approach or a presentation from the chief that said, hey, here's how I want to get back to about 1,400. Because I, too, recall, as you do, what it looked like in our department to have about 1,400 officers, right, and be adequately staffed. Well, I would, I guess, even that statement maybe is not true, but being staffed at that level of 1,400 and what that allowed us to do as a department and being proactive in staffing up the special units, and we have not been able to return to that. But we have a community of people that remember that still, right? And that's what they're looking to return to or to achieve. And some of them, right, that as we're now a decade past the recession, right? So as far as those people are concerned, it's way in the past, and this is a new problem. And essentially, yeah, I guess it is, right? We need to look at it in that way, but we have never even been able to return to where we were there. I do think, though, that the challenge that we've run into right now is unique in its sense that, as you pointed out, Chief, we didn't start off the year, this calendar year, where we were requiring this overtime. This is new. That's kind of developed over the summer, and I wanted to see if we can iron that out a little bit and see if I understand it correctly on a higher level. We're running severely thin. We know that, so we're sort of keeping patrol staffing, trying to keep that adequate, but also at the same time, I know the chief has tried to fulfill spots. For instance, TEU. I've been asking through the Vision Zero Task Force, right, that we staff up TEU for years. When we got down to as low as 4 officers in TEU, it was embarrassing, right, and understandable why we weren't having the level of enforcement. We got back up to, I want to say, 16 or so at best of actual motor officers, right, out doing proactive enforcement. We've now dropped again since then, right? Our lieutenant has retired, and so I think it's fluctuating as normal. My point is that we've asked for a lot of officers in family violence, and we're asking for the special units to have been restaffed. At the same time, right, that patrol is needing to be staffed at an adequate level minimum. What I've seen happen throughout this year is that, yes, we've lost people. The academies haven't, been filled as high as possible. We've had to promote because, right, as you're having attrition or people move on. And it seems like we're sort of in the middle of the year now, and now we're deficient in patrol. Is that a decent analysis of kind of how we got to this point now where we're demanding some more overtime?
Well, yes. I mean, we are at a point where we're experiencing high separations. And as I mentioned before, we did a more thorough analysis of this in our recent presentation to the council about staffing and recruitment overall. But, at the beginning of the year, we did experience a temporary reduction due to COVID quarantines and COVID outages, where we had I think 3 times as many pay cars as these. Now, they were shorter term because they were just for the duration of the person to recover from the virus. But, it does happen from time to time, and that's where we are right now. But I think we're there right now because we operate at kind of a razor-thin margin all the time. And as you point out, all these specialized assignments are very important, but ultimately, if we're going to have a visible presence on the street, if we're going to have police officers that are able to get out of their cars and engage the community like they constantly ask for us to be able to do, I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone say, I wish the officer could just come by when there wasn't anything going on, just to come say hi. We would love that too. We would love nothing more than that. But with the levels that we do have, a growing population and a police department that is 200 lower than it was when I started, I mean, those are hard to achieve. And so we don't want to gut all of our specialized assignments because those serve a critical function as well in the public safety realm, in our overall ability to deliver services and keep this community safe. So I mean, we're doing our best to balance all the competing needs, both the things that the community asks of us and the things that we know we need to provide sort of internally as managers of the department. And it is a challenge. And right now we're facing a little bit more of a challenge than usual, I'll say. But we're hopeful, as Deputy Chief Randall pointed out, that our application numbers are starting to go up somewhat. We're hoping that the academy that follows the October Academy will be bigger, and it's I'm hopeful as a 30-year police officer that the national dialogue around policing changes such that more young people want to choose this as a career, want to choose this as a way to serve their community, not just here in San Jose, but across this country. I've loved this profession. I feel like I've been able to provide a valuable service to the residents of San Jose during my time here, and I think other young people might find that attractive and appealing as well. And until some of that changes, we're going to have fewer people applying than applied once upon a time.
Yeah, thank you. I think that the key takeaway, right, and the key kind of challenge that we have is that we have been operating on this razor thin margin for again for a decade, and likely even longer than that, right, when we should have had maybe some more staffing. But that puts us in this predicament where we're constantly kind of having to make trade-offs, right, where we as elected officials are hearing from our community saying, well, we'd like enforcement here, or we'd like officers here, as you said, with community policing, but we also want patrol. And then we get to this point where we're going, well, we also don't want to have mandatory overtime. And we don't have enough officers to do all the things, quite frankly, that our community would want to see. That, at a bare minimum, I do think I'd like to drill down on, and hopefully before the end of the year while I'm on the committee, where we do figure out what that bottom line number is, right? Where we do figure, I mean, we have a minimum staffing for patrol, right? We have that idea, but I don't believe, tell me if I'm wrong, we don't have a minimum staffing for all of our specialized units, right? Like, I mean, we don't have that, correct?
No, not in the same way. I mean, minimum staffing for police, or for patrol officers rather, is a number we believe keeps the community safe, keeps our officers safe. Doesn't apply for the the detectives or others, but we do have an authorized number of people assigned per unit, and position control numbers per unit, and those are not all filled either. But we do our best again to make sure that. We balance the needs of patrol, the needs of being able to respond in a timely manner to calls for service, which is always the primary thing that we need to do, with the need to staff detective divisions, our special ops units, TEU, things like that.
And I think, and I'll use just one example, but I think you can put any kind of specialized role in this place, but I'll use TEU, Traffic Enforcement Unit. And it has come up in a number of different conversations. Councilmember Davis, right, asking as well through the budget process and through Vision Zero. And when I mentioned that we don't have a minimum staffing, say for instance for TEU, we do have an outlet budgeted staffing, which I think it's around 28 or something like that, right? Jim and I were going back and forth on that a little bit ago, 28, 29, but we're not there. Actually, we're less than half. And we don't have a minimum staffing though. So we don't backfill that. Right? These specialized units, we do with patrol, where we're talking about today with overtime, and we have a minimum staffing. We recognize that that's a priority, and we try to keep that, and we'll bring overtime for it. The rest of these units, in essence, just end up deficient. And then in essence, our community, in my mind as well, ends up with deficient service. And so that's where kind of I would like to see a expansion of our understanding of what minimum staffing looks like, to actually begin to include some, if not all, of the specialized units. Like, granted, we can't just go and backfill, TEU, right? Some of these, you can't just go and pick somebody out of patrol or somebody, hey, and go fill that. But I do think we can say, hey, we do think a city of this size should have no less than 40 traffic enforcement unit officers. I believe 44 was our highest, right, back in 2009 or something. But I think we could come to a number like that with some of these core functions beyond patrol, because today we have sort of all agreed that patrol is a core function, and that's where we want to have a minimum staffing. But we haven't really done that with the rest of the specialized units within the police department. And thus, what happens is, like what happened in 2010 in the recession, we start to just lose them, right? We went from, again, about 44 traffic enforcement officers down to its lowest of 4. And I think anybody in the community would say, hey, that's not right. But at the same time, the chief, right, at the time was having to make those difficult on the razor edge decisions of, all right, we're going to go thin everywhere, thin in SEIU, thin in family, right? And it's unfortunate because we were so thin across the board. everywhere ended up being deficient. So I at least on that level, I'd like to see, it's almost like, what is a minimum staffing for our department? Not just for patrol, right? But where we have a baseline that says, when we start going below this is when we're going to start doing what we're doing this summer, which is mandatory, up to 15 pay cars, or we're asking people to volunteer, or we're forcing them to stay over, right? And because rather than keep cycling through that, maybe we all know, and going into the future, that number gets updated every couple years or something, right, as population grows. But then we have a baseline, and we know that we really should not try to dip below that. And anytime we get close to it, we make the proper investments, or we make the difficult decisions. As Lee was pointing out, that Jim presents and says, you can bring in 20 more full-time equivalent positions in the police department, but it's going to cost you somewhere else, right? But at least the council will have that understanding and know where that is. And I would imagine, and we were talking about this, the vice mayor and I, similarly, the same thing could be done for the fire department, right? I mean, we also have struggled with not having sufficient firefighters, and we know that one of the biggest challenges is, well, we need stations, right? And that's a huge effort of finding property, building a new station, staffing it up. But again, I think that we are likely woefully understaffed in every department in the city, and we probably don't have the best idea of what a minimum staffing level, kind of a baseline, should be, to keep not only progress going, keep the city safe and functioning, but what we're talking about today, which is keep our employees, our workforce, from being burned out, right, and being forced to do more with less. And this is a decade-long circumstance that this city and every single department in this city is experiencing. So it's, we could be talking about other departments right now as well. But I think that we see some core needs definitely within our police department. And so I look forward to that conversation coming back again, hopefully before the end of the year, where we can start to talk about some of these minimum numbers, and then make some difficult decisions or the council next year, right, on what to do with the budget to try and address that. Thanks.
Councilor, I just say that the graphic that the assistant chief was referencing in the NBA hit the cutting room floor, so that wasn't part of the published document, so that's why you didn't see the number there.
So I wasn't just missing it. So yeah, you'll have to share it with me, AC.
Thank you. I don't see any other names on the board or hands raised, so we have a motion and a second.
Arenas?
Yes.
Cohen?
Aye.
Davis?
Yes.
Morales?
Yes.
Jones?
Aye.
I'd also like to, on the record, record a yes vote for Arenas on item C1.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to open forum.
Gail Osmer?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Gail Osmer. I want to first start off telling you all what a wonderful job, respectful job that Beautify San Jose is doing with the cleanup, mostly cleanup at Columbus Park. They've done a wonderful job. I just want to let you all know. One of the main reasons I think things have been going so well is because myself and another unhoused person have moved most of the RVs, as I'm sure you're well aware of, over to the baseball fields. And because Home First and City didn't do their job of helping a lot of the folks. I say city, I mean housing. I'm sorry. But so the people are at the baseball fields. And I'm here to ask you, I know how you feel, Council Member Davis. I know you want everybody out of there, but I think it's very important, logically, if you think about this, to keep everybody in the same place and not the 50 or 55 people that are there dispersing on your neighborhoods. Please do not abate them. We need to find another RV park. The one out in D2 and D10 isn't going to be ready for any of this, but we can abate them because you don't want them in your neighborhood. I don't know, maybe you do, but you know, having a dog park and cleaning all this up, okay, fine. But let's keep all these RV people together. I've been trying to keep it clean. They are keeping it clean. They're bagging their trash. We're putting it together outside. They cleaned up on Saturday. So, you know, it's just logical. Think logically about this because they should be kept together. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Blair Beekman.
Hi, thank you, Blair Beekman. Thanks a lot for the meeting today. Thanks a lot for the words of Gail, who just spoke. I guess, you know, it's become a regular point of myself. Each public comment time now that I really think we can practice and ask for ideas of peace for the future of the Ukraine area now, and that we have to be accepting of what can be a two-state east-west solution to the Ukraine now. These are ideas that have been in place for years now. As to why I'm sort of upset with Russia, they could have continued this peace negotiation process fairly easily, I feel, and instead of going to war. Nonetheless, I hope we can return to this sort of process, and each side can have a port in the Black Sea area, and that each side can talk about racial equity and health and human services ideas from this country that I think can really help heal the future of this area. I hope we can really start those practices now and that peace negotiation process now. Good luck in those efforts. And just a thank you that in the past few days, we've had a pretty intense session about the future of policing in San Jose. I really hope our activist community can weigh in on this subject matter and make it an open conversation for everyday community to understand what's at stake and their part to guide this process towards a more open, shared, equitable future. Good luck how they can do that. I was not happy with new automated audio designs for the future of you know, the body camera program. For police. Please don't go in that direction. Please talk to community, work with community on those sort of ideas, and good luck in our efforts for this issue. Thank you.
Back to the committee.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.